Hello, hello, and welcome to this video. We're going to be talking about unique online learning assessment ideas. This video is part of Online Learning Ideas. We're helping educators make sense of online learning, sponsored by Microsoft. Really appreciate you being here today. We're going to be talking about some cool things related to remote learning, online learning, and how assessment can look different than you might expect it to, than the traditional, than the norm. And we've got some great folks to be able to talk to you about this very thing. I'll say real quick, my name is Matt Miller. I am the author of Ditch That Textbook, and I'm super excited to get to talk to you all today. Also, one of the co-conspirators behind the Online Learning Ideas website. If you haven't checked it out yet, onlinelearningideas.com. We are giving free ideas about making sense of all of this remote learning every single day. We're updating the site. We're pointing to some of the great educators that are putting things out related to it. If you're joining us in the replay, welcome. Glad to have you here. Thank you so much for finding us. If you're watching this live, we would love to say hello to you. So if you are live and you are anywhere near the chat, go ahead and drop your name and your location and what you do into the chat. We've had a couple of familiar faces popping into these, and so would really love to be able to say hello to you. And speaking of saying hello, I'm excited to bring on the other folks that we have on this video. And so we have Holly Clark to my left, my right, I guess. I'm pointing
Somewhere
with my left finger. I'm still getting used to all of this. Absolutely. I feel like this is a Brady Bunch moment, right? Because I'm going to say, then there's Kelly Hilton right down there. So, yeah. So let's do a real quick introduction from Holly and then kick it over to Kelly.
So I'm Holly. I'm Matt's co-conspirator on this onlinelearningideas.com, also co-founder of the Infused Classroom, and I'm going to pass it on to Kelly Hilton.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Hilton, and I'm so excited to be a guest today. I'm one of the co-authors and co-founders of Hyperdocs Digital Lesson Design.
Excellent. So we've got co-authors, we've got co-conspirators, we've got everything today. So I want to jump over here to the chat real quick and say hello to Erin, who is here from Michigan. Good to see you. We've also got Kim she's a TOSA from Union City, California.
And
nice.
Chelsea works with them. I think you do too, Kelly.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Very good. See, we're all old friends in this, right? So we've got Mary here from Pennsylvania. Good to see you. There's Alma from the New Jersey Department of Education. Awesome. Good to have you here. There's somebody that I think most of us know. This is Lisa Highfill. Yeah, she is yet another co-author of the Hyperdocs Handbook. And then we've also got Wendy McMillan here, who is an EC resource and math teacher. So it's good to see all of you here already. And I'm sure other people will be joining too. So lots of good stuff to talk about in this video, right, Holly?
Oh, I'm so excited. So I just want to say, I geek out about assessment, and I think assessment, Kelly and I were talking earlier, we want to bring the sexy back to assessment, because assessment's where you show your craft. Anyone can go to the copy machine or get some things from the back of the book, but this assessment piece is where you show how great of a teacher you are. And so Kelly and I have had the opportunity to travel together, and we spent a lot of time geeking out about pedagogy. So I asked her to come with me and be on this so we could geek out together. So Matt, if you'll show the slides, Kelly and I will get started on geeking out, and you can geek in too.
Yes, absolutely. So here we go.
Any way to show the side of the videos, or is that, I mean, we don't have to. Anyway, so we're starting this with online assessment. Perfect. I love that, because then I can see you guys.
Yeah.
We're starting this with this graphic that's going to take us through what we're going to talk about today. And as we have to rethink assessment in remote learning, we want to remember that there is this kind of linear thing that we can do where we can start with an assessment of prior knowledge. And then when we're done and we get that final product. It's that growth that we grade, and that's how we get an individualized instruction. Individualized instruction is not when kids do an individual assignment at the end. That is called choice. Individualized instruction is knowing your student from point A to the end and seeing that their growth and grading, if you grade their growth on their own trajectory, which is a unique way of looking at things. And that's where this fun geekiness comes in. So if you want to hit to the next slide, I wanted to start with John Hattie because, or first, why should we change? Let me follow along with these so I don't get behind. But why should we change this assessment process? So let's go to the next slide and look at, I'm a freak about two people, and you should know that now. I freak out over Joe Buller and Matt, next slide. And I freak out over John Hattie. John Hattie out of Melbourne, Australia. Matt? Uh-oh, do we lose him, Kel?
We
So,
might you want me to share?
yeah, I think he looks, Matt, next slide. So anyway, I'll talk about the next slide because that's how we do. Oh, nice work.
Hey, we're there.
So one of the things in his book called Capable or Assessment Capable Visible Learners is John Hattie, oh, we totally lost Matt, says that memorization and recall have their place in the cycle of learning, but rarely at the start and certainly not at the end of learning. And right now, as we're going into this remote learning environment, teachers are asking, like, how do I do it? How do I put an assessment online and block kids from looking on Google? Or how do I make sure they're not cheating? If they can cheat, you're not doing assessment probably as well as you could in 2020. So we are going to move to the next slide, hopefully.
Holly, I would just add on there really quickly that in thinking about this, I just want to acknowledge the craft of being a teacher. And it's a very creative craft. And so assessment, especially in this remote learning environment, is asking teachers to be creative and then reminding you that technology will never replace good teaching practices. Our students have access to all of this information, but it's that craft that you're bringing to building these assessments and the lesson design to get them there that's really going to help students learn and grow. And I think about education as a social construct. It's very social, with a connection with the teacher, with a connection with your colleagues, your peers in class. And those are the experiences that teachers are creating right now. So keeping that in mind, just enjoy that creativity as we think about assessment in a different way.
So well said, Kelly. And Matt, your skills are on point today. So today we're going to look at the different assessment types and really looking at what data is, because data does not have to be numbers. And so how do we look at that? And then how do we look at show what you know as a replacement for this memorization? So I just want to give a quick little analogy. I take a lot of online courses still at a city college because I learned to be a teacher, but I never learned to be on social media. So I'm taking these classes, and every class I take, the person gives me multiple choice questions as the assessment. So I don't even care about the class because I know I can just go look them up, and I end up not doing the work because I know I can just kind of BS my way through the content. So we're going to look at how we can do that differently. So if we can go to the next slide. And Kelly and I were talking about this morning, and what is the goal of assessment? Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about this goal of assessment?
Well, sure. I mean, this is where assessment is really sexy because it's exciting to see the growth. This is where we get to celebrate the progress and the process of teaching and learning. As Holly mentioned earlier, you get to see the fruits of all your labor, but the students get to see the fruits of their progress as well. So we always start with what do we want our students to know, but are we also layering that with how will I know that they know it? And if they do show me that they know it, what will I do to challenge those students who already know it? And what will I do to help provide equitable access to those who are not showing what they know? And so in our school district, we keep these 4 questions really in mind as we design all of our teaching and learning. And I think with assessment, the last 3 questions are really the focal point of this.
And so I want to add here, it says, how do I know when they know it? And Kelly and I were talking about this, and really in the remote learning environment, it really needs to be, how do we know? How does the student know? Maybe even the parent. And how does the teacher know? So like, it's our goal to replace I with we. And that's what makes this a unique and great environment for learning, because we can teach kids how to take agency and ownership over their learning through this assessment piece. So it's crazy cool and crazy sexy, to be honest, right, Kelly?
For sure.
So the next slide, we're going to look at like the new face of data. And Kelly, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, and I would say that maybe if you've been in a staff meeting or if you've been in a data talk, you might be looking at one lens of data. And usually that data has to do with more summative type academic assessments that has a number attached to a student, or it's more of a benchmark for a grade level or for a certain progress in teaching and learning. And those are called universal screeners, there is a place for all of that. But I want to invite you to think about what is the other kind of data that you're collecting all the time, because teachers are experts in their students and we're always researching and learning about them. So beyond the academic data, what sort of data do you already have on your students, such as their social and emotional learning capacity or their behaviors that they have that contribute to their success, or challenges that they have in your classroom? So as we talk about creating these assessments, how can we elevate and coach along and support stepping stones to get all students to show their learning in different ways by tapping into everything we know about them, not just their numbers or academic numbers. What do we know about their cultural background? What do we know about their previous educational experiences? What do we know about what they're interested in? And how can we design assessments that are open-ended so that all students can feel that success of creating something and really showcasing their skills?
Can I throw something in on that? I thought that was great that you brought up that there are lots of different lenses of data. There's lots of different versions of data. This is really one of my favorite things to talk about. I've got a story from when I was teaching high school Spanish, and I was collecting some of these different types of data and didn't even realize it. Like, for instance, whenever I would try a new activity and it got my students' attention and I knew that they were fully engaged, my data in that case was their eyes. I had all of my students' eyes on me. And it's like, we're kind of, shortchanging our intuition and our instincts as teachers if we don't count that as part of data. For instance, I would, as a high school Spanish teacher, I would talk to my students and just ask them questions here and there in class. And while we were talking in Spanish, I could see, oh my goodness, a new verb structure just popped up that they just used that they've never used before. That's data too, so the data doesn't have to come in great big formal reports in spreadsheets, because it comes from all different places too. So I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us of that. And Matt, it's like every teacher who walks into a parent-teacher conference or an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting, they're bringing everything they know about that student. And a well-run meeting is going to start with what's going really well with those students. That's all data. So as we know that about our students, we're using that to drive our future decisions in assessment and instruction.
So next slide, Matt. And that data can come from sources that are, the new word that people are using is multidimensional, which means we used to have a worksheet, which is one-dimensional. A multidimensional is looking at it from different aspects, like getting in media, making it physical, making something creative. And this multidimensional approach puts kids in this place where they're having to struggle a little bit with the content. And in that struggle is where they learn. And we know that we need the cognitive struggle, and we need the perfect amount, and this is where the art of teaching comes along, the perfect amount of struggle for each kid. It's not every kid is going to struggle because I'm teaching the Civil War right now and you have to know these facts. It's just not how it works. The struggle comes around the information. So we're going to go to the next slide, and Kelly's going to talk about this UDL of the multidimensional and struggle.
Right. So we've been doing a lot of work around universal design for learning in our school district. And the number one foundation within that is that 100% of us learn differently. And if you haven't had a chance yet, you should check out Todd Rose's The End of Average and his TED Talk, where he talks about this and uses a really great analogy of building an airplane for one body size. And so today I want to keep the work of universal design for learning in our mind as well, because it's just like this cartoon is sharing. What is it, a fair selection that everyone has to take the same exam? Please climb the tree. And if you look at those different animals listed there, this isn't that different than our classrooms. I was a very different kind of student than I am as a teacher. But I have used that in my own life to pull on that and to drive my connections with students. And so I think that we just want to keep that in mind, that 100% of us learn differently. And that's why we're thinking about these kinds of assessments.
And it becomes really true in the remote learning situation where we have to really acknowledge these differences, because if we're just giving out tests that you could do in a Google form with multiple choice answers, we're going to replace ourselves right now. We're going to come back to no jobs, because there's no craft in that. I can sit here and make some work, and the kids can take an online test and they don't need me anymore. So we're either going to show people how this is so important, this pedagogy, or we're going to work ourselves out of jobs. And so this is why it's really, really important. So if we go to the next slide, which actually
share that, Holly. I just want to add on though, one little parental insight. And I'm just going to share this because I have a 7th grader who we're working on doing remote learning with at home as well right now. And what I've observed as a parent on this side is he has his assignments, he has the access. But this week is our 3rd week of doing remote learning at home. And this is the first week that his teachers have been facilitating online conversations through WebEx is the tool that they are using. And so he's now more bought into understanding why he needs to do this work at home. Before then, it felt like I was just telling him to do it, or why do we have to do it? So just going back, that teaching is a craft. And I think the reason that he was excited about it this year is because his teachers were connecting with him face-to-face and allowing him a space to see his classmates and colleagues as well.
Okay, so thanks, Kelly. I had a little trouble paying attention to you because I was obsessed with the light bulbs in the back, with apparently
right.
M&Ms or something.
Yeah, let's get a look at those light bulbs again one more time.
Those are my Hyperdocs light bulbs behind me, and there's an Elevate Books mug.
Oh,
so
nice.
Shout out to Elevate.
All right.
So anyway, so we're going to now start looking at those assessments and what they look like. And we have a lot of examples. So we want to offer to you, and if you can make those go through, so the whole slide shows, Matt, we want to offer to you, we're going to have a part B of this where we actually go in and discuss the examples. But if we went through them all, this would be a 5-hour show, and we don't want that for anybody. So what we're going to try and do in this pathway to multidimensional assessments and assessments that really get at the student as an individual is we're going to transition from traditional, because traditional is how we get ourselves out of jobs. If it's multiple choice, if it's closed questions, if it's fill in the blank or end of the unit questions, anyone can deliver that. But not anyone can deliver the kind of learning where students can make visual representations, create things, do videos like an Adobe Spark, critically think about the content, really find a way to transfer their knowledge into new and novel situations. And so this is our opportunity to really deeply assess our students and to get to know them as individuals. We no longer have those tests weighing on our shoulders. And so we can experiment now. We can become teacherpreneurs, creating classrooms we only dreamt about as kids. So this is like an exciting time. So we're going to talk a little bit about the equity of it for a second, and then we're going to dive into some examples of taking you through that, the infographic that started this show, and look at examples. So go ahead, Kelly, with our next slide.
Okay, I'll be real quick here. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. Right now, as remote teachers, less is more. So this is requiring that teachers are really getting to the essentials. What essentials your students need to know? And so if we take a look at breadth and depth, we are looking for depth of knowledge in these types of assessments that we're building. What does that look like? We'll show next. So Matt, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we also want to highlight the part about that depth of knowledge. The next key is equity. When you design this, how are you creating an assessment? It gives equity and supports that learner variability that we talked about, all the different animals trying to climb the tree. And the third thing to keep in mind is that this is an opportunity to really hear and see more from our students than a traditional assessment gives us, because these kinds of assessments are like the third point in the room. Have you ever felt alone in your classroom when you can't get to everyone? When you collect data in this way, you can go back and rewatch, give feedback, you can share with families, you can see the process. It's this digital portfolio that celebrates the learning process. And that's what's really exciting about this sexy kind of assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do we do this? Now remember, we're going to take you through 5 steps, I think. Do you want to do something, Matt?
Yes, actually, before we get going on these 5 steps, since we've got a little bit of a lull in the conversation, we had a question come up in the chat that I was hoping maybe we could touch on real quickly. So this is a question from Aaron, who says, how can you really assess a student remotely and honestly with access to the internet? I don't know if that's supposed to be with access or without access, but I think, you know, there's a valid point there. What's your take on that?
So that's what we're going to show you right now, but it's really going to be around the access with the internet a little bit. And without it, project-based learning where students explain their thinking, and there's many ways you can explain your thinking without the internet. And so we'll address that as we go through this.
Excellent.
And so we're hoping, and you can go to the next slide, that people will start to consider that if you're trying to do this with the internet and honesty, if a kid is creating their own product that's showing their learning, you have no issues around honesty, because they're creating a product that shows their knowledge. So we're going to look at the first step, and I'm going to let Kelly kind of, and Matt, if you can just click all the way through for each slide to make sure that all the images are there. We didn't prepare to have like a bring in, but I'm going to let Kelly talk about this checklist and the importance of a backward design here.
Yes, as we're considering our remote learning spaces, we really want to design with the end in mind. And this is kind of the difference between covering content and assigning work versus really measuring student growth. And so a lot of times we are taking a look at the end of a unit through a checklist or the essentials. But we're going to encourage you to pull that out now and use that to design everything that leads up to your assessment. So pictured here are a couple of examples. For example, if you're a math teacher, there's 8 practical mathematical practices. Those are your essentials right now. So really focusing on those would be helpful in designing the assessments. Also pictured there is a writing checklist. And when we consider measuring a student's growth in writing, it's sort of like when I was a new teacher and I first learned how to grade writing, I did some anchoring of papers, and I realized that there were certain inequities that were happening, like handwriting was kind of throwing me off, or a student who didn't have the right mechanics to their writing was throwing me off. So they were being marked down only on that. But what I wasn't paying attention to was the organization and the elaboration and the craft of, or the ideas that they were sharing. So these multi-layered checklists are really helpful in considering how you're going to measure the growth of a student's through this assessment. The third example there is Jennifer Gonzalez's 1-point rubric. And I love this because basically it's so simple to understand. It's how to make breakfast in bed is the example. And these are the 3 or 4 things you need to do. And this is how you can consider measuring the growth of your students. And if they're getting it correct, then they would go right there in the middle and you can check it off and they're showing that knowledge. If they're doing more than you asked, you would just put those in the pile to the right as listed there on the rubric. And then if they're not quite there yet, now you have your cluster of students that you need to connect with in a small group and help them get there. And in a remote learning situation, that's actually a little bit easier than in the classroom because you don't have the confines of 30 kids around you all day. You can set up a special time to meet individually or in small groups with those students who aren't quite showing that progress yet.
Thank you, Kelly. And Matt, if you can go to the next slide. So if we want to know what they know outside of multiple choice questions and trying to get them locked into a worksheet that they can't cheat on, we have to assess them and their knowledge before we begin the unit. Skipping this step doesn't give you the ability to see where they were at the beginning and where they're going to be at the end. And so there's no place to grade growth of an individual student. And when we're looking at kids that we're teaching the same content at the same time in the same way, we don't need this. But when we're teaching individual students, we must have it. So in the past, teachers who were doing it might use a Google form and people answer a multiple choice question. They might just have kids raise their hand. Who knows something about the planets? And kids raise their hand, same 5 always. And or they might do a class KWL where they sit with a chart and be like, hey, what do we know about the planets? And then we all fill it out. Well, you don't have the opportunity to do that. And I'm not saying that's exactly great teaching. But now we have this ability with the internet and with apps that are on your phone, so you don't have to have access to the internet, like Flipgrid. And Flipgrid, here you can see one of my students explaining her thought process before we began a unit and telling me everything she knows, for example, about cells. Before we start talking about plant and animal cells. And I'm only using that example because I recently co-taught a unit around that. But now I can have them do a brain dump and tell me everything they know. I also like, if I'm in class, to have kids, after they tell me everything they know, talk to another kid and then fill in gaps and come back and reply to themselves saying, okay, wait, no, I forgot. I know that there's photosynthesis or whatever, and they reply to their original Flipgrid post. And I have this place where I can see, what do my kids know? Where do I need to go in my teaching? How can I differentiate based on some kids know a lot? So there's this really strong place of where I'm gathering that initial information. And I think we all learned about that in teacher preparation school, but most people threw it out, not enough time, whatever. I don't see how you teach without it, to be honest.
Well, yeah, and it might save you time.
Yeah.
Because why would you need to teach something that they already know, right?
And then you'll know if someone's cheating. If all of a sudden they don't know anything in this video and Flipgrid that they're using on their phone, so they don't have to have that internet access, and they tell you, I don't really know anything about plant cells. And then the next thing that you do, they know everything. Something's a little fishy here. So this is like, I just can't talk about how key this is for kids to do a brain dump of everything they know, give them an opportunity to fill in blanks with each other or online and come back and reply to themselves. So if we go to step 2 then, so now we have this assessment of prior knowledge, we've made a learning goal. We have our checklist of what is going to be learned. We ask the kids what they know about this, and then we go to the next slide, which actually is a quote from. I get a little teary-eyed when I see the Joe Bowler name, but it's this idea that, and I'm just going to read this to you as we go into this next part because it's really important. Not only should the work be challenging to foster mistakes, but the environment must also be encouraging so that students do not experience challenge or struggle as a deterrent. And you've got to keep in this craft of teaching enough out there that they're struggling through the content. And then you're checking for that struggle and understanding in this next portion, which is called checks for understanding. So if you can go to the next one, Matt. And you've got to remember the struggle. I always tell the story of how I was teaching 7th grade literary devices, and all of my kids got an A. And I'm like, oh my God. And we did a Kahoot, and they all got it right. And I was like, everyone got an A. And I'm sitting literally in a shower one day about 2 weeks later, and I'm like, I wonder if those kids really still know that. So I went to school that next day, and I brought out the same exam, which was multiple choice because I wasn't at the place I am now. And I gave it to them, and 2 kids got an A. And the rest got B's, C's, D's, and F's because they had regurgitated the information and there was no cognitive struggle, so they didn't take that with them. So how do we do a check for understanding? I'm going to go through these examples in this part B, but here's an example on Seesaw where I'm going to multidimensional. If you can see, these kids are going out and identifying angles. One-dimensional is you have a worksheet that says, here's an angle, tell me which one that is. All you have to do is be like, let me show what my friend says. And I'm worried about academic honesty in that way. But if I tell you to go use Seesaw, go outside, take a picture of a right angle, identify it, and then this is the key. Please, if you hear nothing else today, they need to press record and explain their thinking and tell you what a right angle is. And it's in that articulation. When a kid can tell you something about right angles, they know it. And we need to start pressing record with kids. And when we press record, there's no academic honesty problem because you're telling me what you know. And here's an example of a kid also doing a brain dump for a check for understanding. Kelly, do you want to add anything to this?
I just love that you're actually, you're basically checking within the process. So the long-term goal is set, and that's not it. It's not a one and done. Now you're going to build in these checks for understandings, and that's not just a visual, it's a visual and an auditory collection of evidence and more data. I just think you can learn a lot from that as to where the students are at.
So Kelly, you spoke of something earlier about the uncomfortableness of this.
Yes, I mean, if we can remember back to our teacher credentialing programs, that term zone of proximal development, and this is that uncomfortable space of learning where you're a little bit, and I bet you a lot of our teachers are in this space right now. You kind of are growing as you're learning new tools, and then as soon as you have success, then you're ready to take on another challenge. And so we want our students to get familiar with that. And we have a teacher in our school district who said, this is how she explains the zone of proximal development to her 3rd graders. She says, students, let's just sit in the struggle. And that's the language that she uses with her students daily. And I think that's just something to celebrate and recognize because that's how we grow. It is a little bit of a struggle.
And so with this Flipgrid example, I want to say that I have a free online course for Flipgrid because I would go to these schools and teach teachers about Flipgrid and they'd be like, I love it. This is the greatest thing. And I'd come back, you know, I have multiple engagements with schools often. And I come back and be like, how many people use it? And they're like, oh, I didn't use it. So I made a free Flipgrid course. You can get to it at, and Matt can put this in at infuse.link/online. There's also a free one for Adobe Spark, which you're going to see in a second, and for Book Creator, which I think is the most underused tool out there. I think Book Creator is game changer. And so if we go to the next slide, those are just examples of going from the pop quiz to the, you tell me what you know, check for understanding. And now we're going to look at demonstrations of learning. And like I said, we'll talk about these later. Kelly's actually going to, Kelly, can we do that though, if you're not sharing your screen? Or you can talk us through it?
I can share if you want me to.
Mm-hmm. You can share your screen, sure.
Okay.
And while she's getting that up, I'm going to talk about when we mean demonstration of learning. I'm going to, as a kid, show you what I know. So I want you to imagine a kid sits with maybe the standards and says, these are the standards that I need to know. I'm going to show you in this video or in this thing that I know that I have learned these. And if we're asking multiple choice questions, there's no showing of what you know. There's only me regurgitating or answering for answer choices. And I don't know if there's struggle there or real knowledge. So Kelly, give us an example.
So I just loved this one quick example from one of my students. After we went on a field trip, students were invited to write a personal narrative describing a small moment. It was just a writing activity, describing a small moment from that entire day to try to get them to zoom into the craft of writing. And then after they crafted their draft, I invited them to show their learning using many different tools. They could choose the tool that they wanted to show, and they narrated their own personal narratives and created different visuals. So this student example, I want you to just listen as you hear the student read his own writing. And imagine before this video that I'm going to show you, I just had his handwriting on the page and I had some of the mechanical errors that were on there. But this really showcased his understanding of personal narrative writing and his way of speaking and listening about a small moment on that day. So in this story, he's quickly sharing about this negotiation that happened because we were on a big ship in San Francisco, and he's telling the story of how the kids were asking for no homework as like a fun role-playing part of this activity on the field trip.
It's no homework. Sam said, I want 1 hour extra recess. And EJ said, device day every Friday. But Mrs. Hilton only liked the device day one. In the end of the bargain, our class got no homework for 3 days and device day every Friday, and I felt awesome.
So as his teacher at that point, I was really celebrating that he included some emotion into his writing, but hearing his voice and seeing the skill that it required for him to put the visuals together as well as tell the story, I just think it's a higher level of thinking.
It's multidimensional. That's what we're talking about. And someone, Alma, asked a question while you were doing that about how do we make it comfortable? Well, here, a concern is I have is that teachers and students are unfamiliar with Flipgrid and Seesaw. So introducing a new tool to capture student learning is something teachers can find, but is it something teachers can find useful? So I want to say that when we introduce Flipgrid and or Seesaw, it takes a little time on the teacher's side to, when they give a comment, really help them through those comments, give them advice on how they can make it better. I had this at first when my students first started using Flipgrid. They were like this the whole time. And I had to talk to them about Blair Witch Project. And I went on every video for the first 2 weeks, and they didn't know Blair Witch Project. And if you're under 30, neither do you, but that's okay. You can Google it. And I went on every video for the first 2 weeks to say, that was a good response. Can you bring this out? Can you talk about this? And it took a little time on my end. But then after that, the kids were free to do whatever they wanted, because now they were doing great responses. They were helping each other with their responses. So it takes time, like with any new skill, but it's worth it because of the information you get when a kid narrates and articulates their thought process. That is more valuable than any multiple choice question, I promise, if you can wrap your head around that.
In a future discussion, I do have math examples, as I saw as a math question in the comment. And there's so much power to asking only 4 or 5 math questions and then allowing students to explain their thinking for that, you just learn so much more about where they're at in that process. And then you can capture that one step that they're missing and now help fix that if they need direction there.
I mean, we could do a whole show on tools with math. It's so incredibly powerful. And math teachers are always the ones who tell me, oh, that technology is for other teachers. It's not for my classroom. Like, give me 10 minutes.
I also would just add really quick, Holly, for introducing new tools, Seesaw and Flipgrid, I have a second grade teacher friend who really has been against using technology in the classroom, and now is like in love with Seesaw because she's missing her students so much, and she's sitting in her family room and reading aloud like she would in her classroom. And then she's sharing that with her students. And then one of the parents took a picture of her second grader and his fifth grade sibling watching her video together, sitting together, on one on the other's lap and enjoying her read aloud. And so to me, that's powerful remote learning experiences to still connect with students.
So Matt, if you can put back up the slides, I don't want to keep people here too long, but I want to show these examples of demonstrations of learning like Kelly just talked about. But here are a couple more. Instead of the end of the unit test or the diorama, I had a parent ask me how to do dioramas the other day, and I was like, oh my God, please watch my book creator course, is what I told her. But so here's an example. The first one, the poetry anthology, and we'll look at this in our other part, but it is done using Adobe Page, where the kid compiles everything that they know about poetry that they've learned from they do 3 poems, and at the end they say where they got their inspiration, and they go look at Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes and the people for which they got their inspiration. It's incredible. You can see in the water cycle, this is a comic book done in Book Creator. There's a Book Creator course at thatinfuse.link online, and this child is walking you through the water cycle using Book Creator. This other one is a 7-year-old who's making a report around Roberto Clemente. What you don't know about the 7-year-old is they suffer from dyslexia and dysgraphia actually as well. But they were able to put together this Adobe Spark video, which I saw someone ask, what's an easy video platform on the phone? Adobe Spark. Hands down, the greatest. They come with templates. We also, on the free courses, I have one for Adobe Spark too. I'm trying to help teachers, people. So if you go to the next one, here are just a couple more examples of demonstrations of learning. And there's no cheating on this. No one else can make this kid's Adobe video for him. And it's going to take a moment to load because they are rich. They're big files. But one of them, when we get to it, is the state report. And this state report, instead of doing a 5-paragraph essay, and here's what people ask on state reports. They ask the state motto, the state bird, the state flower. And the reason that we ask for those is because those are what are in the encyclopedia. That's how old that kind of knowledge is. And so when it does load, I'm sorry, Matt, I made it too big.
We got the person with the slowest internet connection trying to load the richest file.
So in a minute, you'll see it. If not, we can share these slides. But this child instead went to Tour Creator, and I could probably share my screen. Let me just share mine and show you. And I don't know what it's going to show. It's probably going to show you guys. So do you see the California State Tour right now? Did I do it right?
Let's see.
Oh, no, I haven't shared it yet. Here we go. So tell me now, do you see the California State Tour?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so this is made by a kid, and instead of doing the 5-paragraph essay, you can see that the 5-paragraph essay, I mean, here's the first paragraph, come to our state capitol, but it also has the multimedia part of it. It has music with our state song and her narrating it. This is the state capitol building in downtown. So we get the point. We go to Napa Valley, which is a hot spot here in California. We can go to Yosemite and see Yosemite. I love this one. She got a 360 of Lake Tahoe from some people who were paragliding. But and this is what, to me, 21st century report looks like. We have images that you have to select that really show. She's got information about the state. And so this is the kind of stuff that can happen if we're, oh, sorry about that. I'll stop sharing and not be a rookie on that. But that's the kind of stuff that's in there. There's a narrative report in there. There's also the Minecraft mission. So in California, we have to do mission projects. Well, parents have been doing them historically, but if a kid makes a Minecraft about it, that's in there as well. And I don't know, Matt, if you can go to the show what you know section, which isn't as heavy in video content. We can let Kelly kind of bring us home and end this with this end part of our assessment process, which kids cannot cheat on.
Yeah, I would just keep in mind that you have created the purpose for students through your lesson design. And then you might consider asking them to just show what they know, everything that they know around the content that you want them to learn about. And there's so many tools out there. Don't be limited by the tools that you choose to use. I was very surprised in the classroom when I didn't know certain tools, and other students, I would actually vulnerably share that with my class. I don't really know how to use this tool, but if you do, could you try it out? And then 5 kids would email me projects that night. They figure out different tools. What we're doing is really creating the purpose for them to design and create online. And pictured there in the middle is a tech set called Digital Designers, Developers. And in that tech set, that was like my motto in my classroom, like you're digital designers and developers, and you can, and directors, sorry, that's the third part of it. So those were tools for like directing or developing a website or a game or something. And they would just choose one of those to show me what I needed to know from them. They just need to learn how to get that link and send it back to you afterward. There's also the Show What You Know bingo board, which is linked to a lot of Hyperdocs that I've designed. And it's really in the apply section. They choose the tool, you give them the purpose. And pictured on the bottom right is a sample where you can also make it really simple for starters and just offer Adobe Spark. But do you want to create a page? Do you want to create a video or a post? And then you can measure the students' learner variability around showing their thinking visibly in that as well, in that measure. But all of those are linked on the slides, and you can file, make a copy, and modify them to fit your needs.
So I have 2 questions that came up on the side I want to address. First was time. This is great, multidimensional, but we have tests. And so I just want to give a shout out to Martin Moran out of Chicago, has a very innovative school. And he says, listen, we've got tests. And they take a certain amount of time for test prep. And I think if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. Or maybe your test prep becomes instead your homework, and you honor that these kids do have a test. But if we have the critical thinking skills that we are doing with this multidimensional teaching and assessment, they will do fine on these tests. I promise you. I'm a 20-year teacher who has never had any issues. In fact, I've had the highest scores in some of my districts ever, and I never taught to the test. So it becomes taking a breath and trusting in yourself and trusting in kids. And another one, someone said, these are great. They're middle school and elementary. Well, actually, they're not. The page example for poetry was high school. And one that well, I don't know if I put it on there actually, and I can include it so you can find it. Some of the writing samples were for high school. So all the differences between elementary and middle and high school is that the product at the end is going to be that much better because they have the ability to create stronger products. But you should still be asking them to do the same thing. They should be thinking and writing and creating these products at their level. So Matt, if we can go back, a couple of my favorite people are here right now, some South Africans. So I want to go to this final, we're going to end now and talk about if you can go back to that quote, to end, I just want to say, when we value memorization over depth of understanding, and I want you to really think about this, we harm the deep thinkers who turn away from the subject because they're like, this is, I don't care. And that was me, to be honest with you. I was like, I got this. I'll take your test. And I walk around with questions now in my adult life about science because I was like, yeah, I can take your test. So we turn away deep thinkers who turn away from the subject, and we also harm the successful memorizers who would have been helped by this approach to knowledge that gives them access to deep understanding. So we're harming both kids. And so at some point, it's a moral issue of getting ready for the test or making them ready for life. And that's a decision maybe you've got to struggle with on your own. And as we go to the next slide, I did a post today about these 8 superpowers for remote learning. If you have to teach teachers certain apps or tools, or you need to, as a teacher, learn some yourself, I really highly recommend that you look at some of these 8 tools because they are rising to the top of the most effective ways to get at student thinking and understanding, to make their student thinking visible, and to know when they know something and when they don't, and to give them the resources to learn. And so you can find that on hollyclark.org, and it goes into why these certain tools are great and how we can use them. And then finally, in that last part of the assessment, which is the next slide, Matt, is reflection. Now, here's what I find about reflection. Teachers don't find time for it. And certainly in this remote learning, we're just figuring stuff out. So it's probably going to be, again, the thing that falls to the wayside. But if we look at Dewey, who said we don't learn by doing, we learn from reflecting on what we're doing. And so we need to start to bring that in, as well as reflect on our process and what we're getting from kids and all of that. So we don't want to spend a lot of time on reflection. Maybe that will be one week we look at reflection. But we want to end in the next slide with the 2 thoughts. And Kelly's going to talk about this, and we'll be ending.
I just love this quote that a teacher shared with me earlier this year. And the quote is going to be when Matt clicks on it really quick.
That might be the quote. Sorry.
No worries. I was working with a group of teachers, and we did all this training just on assessment. And they had been texting each other, doing what teachers do, like reflecting on their process. And I said, they said, this was our favorite quote as a team. I got in the habit of making sure that the last question of every assessment is, what else do you know that I didn't ask you? The responses vary, but I love it as another way for students to communicate their comprehension. So if you're starting with Google Forms and multiple choice, and that's where you're at, add this question at least as one way to level up, because you might be surprised by what students know and what they share with you beyond what questions were asked on the test. If you're moving into designing ways for students to show their learning, this is that quote. You're asking them to show everything that they know about that. And I think it's a very daunting task. It can make some students who like to get the right answer a little bit nervous. And so they're sitting in that struggle a little bit. But it can be very empowering for students who might typically get multiple choice back with not as many answers done correctly, but they might really surprise you by what they know when you're giving them the opportunity to open it up and shift instruction in that way.
And as we go to the next slide, we're going to answer questions. And by the way, we will share these slides with you. We are so happy to have you have this as a resource for teachers. And then the next slide really talks about, no, the one before, Matt. It's actually a friend of ours, Sarah's class, and looking at and hitting home who's in your class. Some of them are prefers written expression. Some of them are super emotional. We know this, and care deeply about certain things. Some are super artistic, so they should be sketchnoting. Some are super thoughtful. And how are we reaching each of their needs? And I think remote teaching makes it easier, to be honest with you, because we have this time where we can where we don't have to teach as much and we can really look at who they are as learners. And one of the things that Matt and I are going to do on Thursdays, we're going to have a live video call with a teacher from Hong Kong. And the reason we've chosen him is because it's around project-based learning and how can we do these project-based learning things at home. He's been doing this remote thing for 6 weeks. He's also used to work at High Tech High. That's how I know him, here in San Diego. And now he's kind of running a project-based school in Hong Kong. And there's a lot we can learn about project-based learning as how do we do it in this remote situation. And so we're going to be talking about that. But Matt, as we end, and maybe some question and answers, did you find any that maybe we didn't answer, or Kelly, or?
Yeah, here, let's bring this one up real quick. This was a question from Bronwyn earlier. She says, what are your thoughts on the high focus on synchronous learning at the moment? And I thought this was so interesting because we have synchronous learning as in video calls, but we also have synchronous learning as far as face-to-face in the classroom too. It seems parents want their money's worth and many see that as video conferencing with a teacher behind the glass. I think that's a really great point, and it seems like there's really some validity to that. So I touched on it a little bit in a comment in the chat, but I'd love to hear Holly or Kelly if you have any thoughts on that.
First of all, Bronwyn lives in South Africa, and it's like I believe she does, if I have that right, and it's really late there. So shout out to you. But I actually wanted to pass this off to Kelly.
Yeah, I'm glad she asked this question because I think that I want to honor the teacher. And so what I would like it to encourage you to do is think about being really, really selective with the time that you spend with students, because you're not only managing your students from home, but you're also managing your own family from home as well. And so if synchronous learning is something that works for you and you think it's going to help motivate some students, then go for it. But if it doesn't, then there's plenty of asynchronous tools that will allow for motivating students and offering discussion. When it comes to the parents' piece of wanting their money's worth, I am not sure about that. I would say that I think our parents are our greatest allies right now. So if there's a way that we can change that narrative a little bit and build a bridge or build a connection with the homes, because from where we're sitting right now, I work in a really high performing school district with really high performing students and parents and teachers. But everyone is working at such an incredibly high, fast pace. I'm not sure that we can sustain it. So we need to be a little more open and build bridges right now to be selective of our time. That's just something that I would like to, and I'm very protective of our teachers right now because I feel like they're thinking that they need to do it one way, or one way is right and one way is wrong. But just like in your classroom, you know what's best for your students in teaching and learning. So I would just say, trust that.
Matt, were there any other questions?
Here's a quick one that I'll bet Kelly can touch up on the screen here to answer this one. It says, hey, Hyperdoc girls, where is your remote learning video?
Awesome. Well, we're doing live webinars this week from our Hyperdoc group community as well on Facebook. So if you're looking for some videos or some strategies there, feel free to add a Hyperdoc community group to your Facebook page. We're also sharing that out on Twitter, and it's on our blog at hyperdocs.co. I don't know. We'll have to see about getting a formal one on the remote learning website.
There you go. Yeah, definitely. Do you know off the top of your head what the Facebook link is that I could drop in the chat real quick?
Yes, it's actually a bit.ly. It's just a bit.ly Hyperdocs FB.
Hyperdocs
that's
FB.
good.
All lowercase?
It's plural. It's all lowercase and it's plural, Hyperdocs FB. So BIT bit.ly/Hyperdocs FB.
Okay.
And we are doing a 5 days of remote learning strategies, and our series is called Building the Confidence to Teach in a Remote Learning Environment. So if you're not sure what a Hyperdoc is, please join us. It's really a digital lesson that you can package all of the teaching and learning in one place. And a lot of what we talked about today is the apply and how to get them there in that lesson design that leads up to that assessment and application of knowledge.
Matt, I also just shared this slideshow with, if people want to use infuse.link and then /online with a capital O. I probably shouldn't have done it this complicated. Capital O and then live, all capital live. They can get right to it.
Infuse.link /
online, and O is capitalized, stupid me. And then live, all capital. Oh wait, I messed up, so I can do it again. Hold on. It didn't go.
Holly, I dropped the link to the slides in the chat earlier, and I'm about to do it again. So that might be just as easy.
Now I'm working with the school district in Maine, and I am late to my little work with them, or not yet. In 1 minute, I'll be late. So I have to jump off. But is there like one more pressing question before, or are we good?
No, I think we've covered most of them right there, and we've been going at this for an hour strong. So I think now is probably up. So thank you again, Kelly, so much for joining us and making this happen. And Holly, your expertise is invaluable as always. Thank you to everyone that's been watching and have been dropping comments in. If you're watching this in the future on the recording, thank you so much for doing that. Of course, you can check out more great stuff at onlinelearningideas.com. We've got new content up there every day, at least right now as of this recording. We're putting new stuff up every day. Kelly, is the best place to learn about Hyperdocs still hyperdocs.co?
Yes, it is. Yeah, please check it out.
Okay.
And follow Kelly at Kelly Hilton.
Yes, I'm on Twitter too. And Sarah Landis and Lisa Hypel are co-creators with me.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Holly. We appreciate all that you're doing to create this platform to have these discussions as well.
And we're going to keep going on assessment Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific, right? No, 8 p.m. Eastern.
If you go to onlinelearningideas.com and you go to the video, the live video page, you'll get all the details there. We're going to let you all go. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next video.